Hey there everyone, welcome back to another Game Vault video. As always, I'm Captain Beefy with the Game Vault, and we're going to talk about Square Enix today and some of the stuff that's going on behind the scenes there and taking a look at their plan for the future. So let's cue up the music and we'll get right into it. Alright, well, first and foremost, Square Enix, there used to be two major companies back in the day. They've been in existence since about, I think it was 2003 that both Square and Enix merged and became Square Enix. You might recognize some of these titles from them, like Final Fantasy games, including the Final Fantasy XIV online game. Saga Emerald is a new game coming out from them, and they've done quite a bit here as we can scroll through their page and just take a look. Dragon Quest, that's another big series from them. I think Dragon Quest started with Enix and Square started Final Fantasy, if I'm not mistaken. But overall, this is a big company, big Japanese gaming developer, and you can tell that from their art style and all that on all their games. Star Ocean, it's just absolutely shows, very much Japanese style of making games here. And then you got Foam Stars, their recent multiplayer. I think it's a free-to-play game with seasons in it and all that, PlayStation exclusive, all that fun stuff. And we'll look at their games. Like I said, they go back to 2003 when they put out their first games together, and you can see throughout their history they've done a lot of exclusive stuff. PlayStation 2 there, Windows there, Game Boy, PlayStation. We're moving to the PlayStation 3 era. We got a Nintendo DS, PlayStation Portable. They've always had a really good relationship with Sony and have done a lot of exclusivity with them, as well as Nintendo. They seem to leave the Windows platform behind a little bit, and Xbox and all that, not working with them as much as other companies. But that's kind of changed a little bit in recent years, but not 100%. I mean, even if you look at like release dates here, right? Like Final Fantasy Realm Reborn was PlayStation 3 and Windows originally, right? And of course, this is the upgrade to the new system and all that. And it eventually was brought into PlayStation 5 and all. That's not a really good example of it, but here we go. Final Fantasy X and X-2 High Definition Remaster. 2013-15 for the 4, finally came to the Switch in 2019. So there's a lot of that going on with how they release games and all that, which is kind of wild. And they've done a lot. They've been very successful, but they've also had some big failures. One of the largest failures. Here's a great one here. This is Valkyrie Elysium. That was a fairly successful one, from what I understand. I never played that one myself, but heard a lot of good things about it. Forspoken was a big failure. Crisis Core Final Fantasy VII Reunion was supposed to be pretty good. That one did well. But look at that. Windows, Switch, 4, 5, Xbox One, and X and S. That's a good release. That's what they got to do, right? We get down here. We've got the Final Fantasy Rebirth, just PlayStation 5. Foam Stars, where was that? That didn't come out too. There it is. PlayStation 4 and 5 just came out in 2024. And it's a freebie, and it's only available there. It's kind of a weird thing to do, but yeah. So, what I want to talk about today is Final Fantasy maker Square Enix will aggressively pursue a multi-platform strategy after profits tumble. Square Enix has announced a significant company reboot amid tumbling profits, reporting its financial performance for the financial year ending March 31st, 2024. Sales in the digital entertainment segment, which includes video games, rose by 2.6%, but profit fell by 15.8%. This despite the sale of Final Fantasy XVI, Final Fantasy Pixel Remaster, Foam Stars, and Final Fantasy VII Rebirth. Specifically on HD games, the subcategory Square Enix uses to encompass all the above games, the company saw a significant operating loss of approximately $51.9 million US. That's huge. It's a lot of money to lose. Now, I've heard of companies losing more on a single game. I've heard of movies losing more on a single movie, but still, losing $52 million is not a good look, and no company is going to be happy with that. Final Fantasy XVI and Final Fantasy VII Rebirth both launched as PlayStation 5 exclusives, and while Square Enix has announced a sales figure for Final Fantasy XVI, it is yet to do so for Final Fantasy VII Rebirth, the second game in the company's trilogy of Final Fantasy VII remakes. In its financial report, all Square Enix would say is that it has suffered from an incomplete journey to better profitability in HD game development, and that it had launched many titles, but some failed to live up to profit expectations, especially outsourced titles and some AAA titles. It seems like Final Fantasy VII Rebirth at least is included in that. So, I understand why a console would want exclusive games to it. I understand why Sony would want games. I understand why Xbox would want games. They say games sell consoles, right? And to some degree, yeah, they do. You know, if you really want to play God of War, you know, you're going to buy a PlayStation to play it when it comes out. Now, the landscape has changed. You know, you don't need to buy an Xbox to play Xbox games because of Game Pass, you can play it on a PC, and more, Sony is releasing games onto the PC. You know, it's taking a lot longer. They're not doing it like Xbox is with Game Pass and all that. It's not the day of release and all that it's coming out, and it's also available on PC. They're being ported over, and with not always the best of shape either. I mean, The Last of Us, was it Part 2 or Part 1? One of those that made it over there was an absolute crap show in the beginning. It's just terrible, you know. So Sony hasn't perfected this yet and hasn't figured it out yet. But these are their own studios, right? Like, they produce God of War, they produce Horizon Zero Dawn, you know, the Horizon series, The Last of Us and all that. These are their guys that work for Sony. So bringing them over is their own thing. But for someone like Square Enix, and from my understanding, it's like, if we look throughout their history, they always release on other, not always, but a lot of times they'll have a staggered release on different platforms, right? So maybe it'll be PlayStation first, maybe it'll end up on the Steam store later on, maybe it'll end up on Xbox later, and then finally Switch, or whatever the new Nintendo is going to be when it comes out. You know, they kind of stagger it that way, and I don't know if that's because of how they developed the game, that they don't want to develop it for multiple platforms at the same time, or is it just an exclusivity agreement with PlayStation, with Sony, to where they're like, all right, well, you know, we'll give it to you for a year, you get that game for a year exclusive, and then we're going to release it elsewhere. But even then, it doesn't seem like it releases everywhere else. But it does vary from title to title. But it seems really kind of silly that they do that so much, because I don't know. I mean, Sony must be kicking them quite a bit of money for that, for those rights. And for something like Foam Stars, now, again, not my type of game. We talked about those free-to-play games in the last news segment, and I'm not about those very much. But Foam Stars is Foam Stars. It's one of those type of games. Wouldn't it make sense to release that to everyone to get the maximum amount of people the ability to play this free game? Jump in and spend money on microtransactions and maybe create a thriving community that actually likes the game, rather than limiting it to one platform and one group of players, you know. Because again, those games appeal to a certain type of player. Not everybody wants to play an online game that's a constantly online game, that's one of those free-to-plays with skins that you buy and the competition daily and all that. You know, there's a limited amount of people that play that, and there's a lot of games out there that are better than Foam Stars, that do it right, and that have been doing it for a long time and are making money at it. Why limit your audience? That's just foolish to me. But again, I'm not making these deals for these guys. So Square Enix, though, looks like they're changing here. So in response to tumbling profits, Square Enix announced what it calls Square Enix Reboots and Awakens, a 3-year plan for rebooting for long-term growth. This involves a rethink across all parts of business, but the highlight is to shift to a multi-platform strategy. Square Enix said it will aggressively pursue a multi-platform strategy that includes Nintendo platforms, PlayStation, Xbox, and PCs. Note the wording here of Nintendo platforms, with Nintendo set to announce its Switch successor console before April 2025. Yeah, but 2025. Okay, I was thinking of this year. I'm like, wait a minute, we're already in. Anyway. So, as part of this multi-platform push, Square Enix said it will build an environment where more customers can enjoy our titles in regards to major franchises and AAA titles, including catalog titles. The suggestion in all this is mainline Final Fantasy games will ditch PlayStation exclusivity going forward, although Square Enix has yet to announce specifics beyond Final Fantasy XVI's upcoming launch on PC. There's also a shift from quantity to quality, Square Enix said, and a bid to deliver ensured fun. Square Enix has been accused of pumping out too many Final Fantasy games in too short a time frame, so perhaps this means the release of major Final Fantasy games will be spaced out a bit more. Overall, it's a tough time for Square Enix, which has already absorbed approximately $140.1 million in what it called content abandonment losses ahead of today's financial report. Square Enix did not name the canceled or rescoped in development titles, so $104.9 million in content abandonment losses. These are games that they were developing and working on and you know, various stages of development, and they just said, you know what, we're scrapping it. We're cutting our losses. And this might be a good thing, you know. We'll have to see what happens here, but I'm rooting for Square Enix. I like Square Enix overall. Looking ahead, Dawn Trail, the expansion for ongoing MMO Final Fantasy XIV, launches in late June. Square Enix also has Kingdom Hearts 4, the third game in the Final Fantasy Remake Trilogy, and Dragon Quest XII in the works. I was a little concerned when I heard about the not-so-wonderful sales of Final Fantasy Rebirth that maybe they would cancel that third Final Fantasy VII Remake, but they can't do that. They can't leave that on the table. That would be... God, that would be bad. It really would be bad. So hopefully that doesn't happen, but we'll see. In February, Square Enix director and president Takashi Kiryu reportedly told analysts about plans to create a new company structure following falling sales in its digital entertainment business, despite the release of Final Fantasy XVI in June. Square Enix said the PS5 exclusive sold 3 million copies during launch week. A PC port is in the works. In January, Final Fantasy XVI producer Naoki Yoshida said it might be time for a younger generation to lead the franchise and helm Final Fantasy XVII. That's kind of interesting. That could be good, and that could also be bad. We've seen a lot of what happens when you pass the buck on to the next generation. A lot of times these games just kind of get destroyed. They get infected with a lot of identity politics and all this other garbage. Hopefully the Square Enix will be immune to that. We'll see what happens. But I am rooting for them because I want to see them be successful. But then I got more news from these guys, and it looks like Square Enix confirms that US and Europe layoffs as part of their restructuring program. And that's a shame. That's not something I wanted to hear. I was preparing to do this video earlier today, kind of reading about everything and all that. And one of the things I wanted to commend them on was the fact that they're doing this without canning people. Now, they've already shut down the studio that created Forspoken. There's already been issues and all that where they've had to lay people off and get rid of them. Now it looks like we're going to see more, and this is sad. Square Enix is set to make an unconfirmed number of layoffs as part of ongoing company restructuring, it told staff in an internal meeting on Monday. VGC understands. This is from, what is this? VideoGamesChronicle.com. I'll link both articles down here in the comments, or not in the comments, but in the description. So according to people who were in attendance, Square Enix president Takashi Kiryu said that both the company's American and European arms would be hit with layoffs, which will happen over the course of the next month. The scale of the layoffs wasn't shared, but staff were told that people working in publishing, IT, and Square Enix's collective indie games division will be predominantly affected. Those impacted will be informed this week, staff were told. In the UK, employees will enter into a one-month consultancy period as per local employment law, while US-based staff could leave their roles before June. Following the internal meetings on Monday, many of Square Enix's main Slack channels were locked, VGC was told. The layoffs coincided with the publication of the company's quarterly financial results today, in which Square Enix said it plans to rebuild overseas business divisions from the ground up and has begun optimizing costs at its European and American offices via structural reforms. VCG has asked for Square Enix for a comment on this story. Now, Kiryu, who was appointed as The Final Fantasy firm's new boss in June 2023 has been enacting a large-scale reorganization of Square Enix's development efforts in an effort to reverse recent disappointing sales of its biggest games. In Japan, Square Enix recently promoted a new group of creators to its executive offices and placed checks on producers' influence over individual products, according to Bloomberg. So yeah, they're doing a lot. They're really trying to get things to work and keep this company going forward, because this is a big one here. I mean, this is Final Fantasy. This is Dragon Quest. There's a lot going on. Kingdom Hearts. I mean, my God, there's no reason for them not to be successful. And maybe it is time. Maybe it is time to focus. Maybe studios and developers and all that are better when they focus on what they do. If they've got good IPs and they focus on just building upon that and making better versions of that game, newer versions, sequels, whatever, however you want to look at it. Like Final Fantasy is not a game full of sequels, even though we're up to 16 right now. Final Fantasy is more of an ideal, a style. So it's hard to describe it, right? Because these stories don't all directly impact each other. Now, there have been some sequels and tie-ins in the past, but for the most part, they're all individual stories that take place with, different characters, different lands, different evils and all that, but they share a common DNA and the way combat works, the way items are with the Phoenix Downs and so forth, with the materia to summon creatures, these what do they call them? Stuff like Behemoth and all this other, wild magical things that they can do. That's what ties them all together. It's not a story that does it. It's just this feeling, and that's what makes Final Fantasy, and that's what's pretty cool about it. And I think the original, I don't remember who said it, but I remember it might have been a director of the original Final Fantasy 1 or 2, something like. No, I think it was the original Final Fantasy. The game was named that because this was like the guy's last effort to make a video game. If this didn't work, he was going to leave video gaming and go do something else, go back to school, I think it was, or something like that. So, I guess this was his final fantasy, and that's what kept it going throughout the years. And that's kind of neat. I like little stories like that. I'll have to, if anybody knows the real story behind that, let me know down in the comments. But I remember reading about that at one point in time. So anyway, earlier today, Square Enix published a new medium-term business plan, which revealed its intentions to make its AAA games multi-platform going forward. Yada, yada. We've already talked about that. Talked about them losses and all that. Going multi-platform, but yeah, there is going to be some fallout, and some people are going to lose their jobs, unfortunately. Let me know what you think in the comments about Square Enix as a company. Do you like their games and all that? Do you like what they do? I've enjoyed their work. They feel like they don't generally put out garbage, but they have put out a lot of stuff, and I think reining it in a little bit and focusing will be better, because you can print money with games like Final Fantasy, if you do it right. And if they release that on all platforms instead of just PlayStation 5, that most recent Final Fantasy 16, that 3 million in sales would have probably been 10 million. I'm just throwing it out there. You would have had it on Xbox available. You would have had it on Steam and all that. You would have sold a lot more. People would have absolutely ate that up and all. To have to wait. Sometimes when you wait for a game, it's just not as good. Now, sometimes it doesn't matter, right? Like, I recently picked up Grounded on PlayStation, and I remember when it came out a few years ago on, I think it was on Xbox, right? And my friend was playing it, and he's like, "Oh, check this game out. It's a survival game." And I was watching it play. I'm like, "Oh, it's pretty cool, man." So I looked up, like, "Oh, when can I get Grounded?" And I'm like, "Ah, crap! It's an Xbox exclusive." So now it's on PlayStation, which is cool. So I got it. I was like, "You know what? It's a fun little game. It's totally different." So yeah, it didn't really ruin anything for me on it, because the game's brand new to me at this point. I don't really know too much about it, but it is fun for what I'm doing. But anyway, I got off subject there. Let's bring it back in. If you like this video at all, please leave a like on it down below. Don't forget to subscribe to the channel and ring that bell for notifications. As always, I'm Captain Beefy with the Game Vault. I'll see you guys next time. Until then, peace.